What are some common misconceptions about these rewards and loyalty programs that most people have?
The most common one is that a mile is worth a fixed value, right? So people nowadays, I think most are saying like a mile is a penny. It could be a penny. It should be worth more than a penny if you're using it, in my mind, correctly. But that's what most people are now saying is because I earn, 1x, 2x, 3x miles or points on spending, the same thing as cash back. It is if you cash it out. But if you're using that for a flight or a hotel stay, depending on who you're earning it from, because obviously the number of points that you earn vary from program to program, they're not the same. No two programs are the same, right? Each program has a different value and it varies as well based on what you're redeeming it for. So a mile is not worth any set value, even from person to person, even the same program, right? It depends what you are redeeming it for.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Ignite podcast. Today we're thrilled to have John Taylor Garner on the program. He's a founder and CEO of Odynn. He's revolutionizing the way people maximize their rewards through AI-driven optimization. And when I say rewards, I mean credit card rewards with financial institutions, fintechs, travel platforms, loyalty programs. He has a background in fintech, derivatives, portfolio management. He's been recognized on Focusrite 35 under 35, serves on the Forbes Advisor Board. And before launching Odynn, he founded Curator, an app for optimizing points and miles. We're excited to dive into his unique background and what's next for Odynn. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you for having me. Excited to be here.
Yeah. So what inspired your transition from derivatives trading, which funny enough sounds like, what travel points are, and launching a fintech startup?
It's hard to say. So I didn't get into it because I knew I needed to be an entrepreneur and I had to revolutionize the world. I ultimately wanted to build something for myself. So I love trading. I still love the markets and everything, but my day to day was changing. The bureaucracy was getting quite heavy. I was doing less and less trading. I was dealing more with legal, compliance, surveillance, regulators than actually trading. And so I had to ask myself, do I want to do this for the rest of my life or do I want to go do something that I'm more passionate about? And at the time, I was quite passionate about traveling around the world for free in first class and business class and staying in five-star hotels on points and miles, right?
Sounds pretty
Not
good.
not hard to see
I'm
why
laughing
I was.
because we just got the Chase Sapphire, which you can tell me if that's a good one or not. My
Yeah,
wife's
it
like,
is.
hey, we get if we just put 4,000 on it in the first few months, we get enough for basically a free flight.
You're exactly right. And it's a great card. I've had that card multiple times.
Cancel it, wait a certain amount of time and redo it so you get the 60,000 points again.
Exactly.
A little hack.
The term's called churning, churn through your cards. And I started doing this while I was a volatility trader. I still live in New York City, right? And you go eat at restaurants and bars, and they cost money, right? So it's like, well, I like to earn something for the spending. And so I started with, I think at the time it was the Fidelity Visa card, which was a 2% cash back card, no annual fee. It's like, oh, this is great. I'm getting 2% cash back on everything. Nowadays, there are quite a few of those. They're more mainstream.
Amazon's our main, right? Because we buy everything through Amazon. And then we have a Costco card when we go to Costco. And we're ended up like my wallet is growing. I'm going to have two wallets now. It's getting a little crazy.
It is. And so that's exactly how I started, right? And so my wallet started to get crazy. And then at the end of 2018, right, that's when I decided to leave. I was at Merrill. I decided to leave being a volatility trader. I wanted to build a all-in-one solution to solve this problem for people, which was like which card to use for a given purchase. Because it starts to get confusing if you have multiple cards. Which cards to apply for? Like if you had a goal, you want to fly to Tokyo in first class, or you just want to maximize cash back, whatever it was. That's what I set out to build because that didn't exist. I wanted it for myself, right? That's what I wanted to build for myself and my friends because, I would get asked 20 questions from everybody, be like, oh, I'm thinking about this new card, or I want to fly here in first class. Can you help? And I was that person, right? I was that person that's there to help.
You're
And so
the
that's
expert in the friend group.
exactly. Exactly. So that's how Card Curator was started. It's like literally built this for myself to kind of give myself more free time so that I'd be like friends that asked, I'd be like, hey, just use this. But it was kind of how it got started.
Yeah, go in here, set your goals. It'll help you kind of guide you through which card you should get.
Exactly. And so I had no formal training in fintech. I did know a thing or two about algorithms, right? As a volatility trader, I built tons of them. And so I built the core algorithm that drive the recommendation system and the personalization system in Card Curator. And when we launched it, we were competing with the likes of, NerdWallet and Credit Karma, which were not personalized, like they're just generic recommendations. Eventually, the Points Guy, their app came out about 9 months after us, and we launched it with great success. We won the best credit card app of the year from Real Simple Smart Money, dethroning NerdWallet and Credit Karma, which dominated it for like the last decade, basically. But ultimately it was all for naught, because at the end of that, by the end of 2021, airlines and hotels, their loyalty programs started to shift from a static, like a fixed price, to a dynamic variable pricing. This ruined our recommendation system, right? If we're telling people how to go to Tokyo in first class, we need to know the cost of that flight before we can recommend how many miles it is to get there. And as we had less and less clarity, our recommendations were becoming worse and worse.
So, but both the monetary value of the points, but also the cost on the other side started to fluctuate. Used to be like, hey, I get the 50,000 points. Hey, I get a flight. I get a first class flight. If it was 30, I get a regular coach flight. And now there's
Exactly.
this shift in the industry where they're like, well, actually, the points are worth different amounts depending on how you want to cash them in.
Exactly. And so that flight, so before COVID, right, you can fly anywhere in the US, anywhere in Europe, in economy, round trip for 60,000 miles, 30,000 miles each way, as you said, right? Or vice versa, doesn't matter which way you were going. So that flight could still be 30,000 miles each way. It could be 15 if it's on sale, right? Or it could be 50 or 100, or literally I've seen a million. It could be anywhere in between. So the range is drastic. Whereas before it was, as you said, 30. That was the price.
And so what are some common misconceptions about these rewards and loyalty programs that most people have? Like, you've now been thinking about this space for almost a decade.
Yeah, the most common one is that a mile is worth a fixed value, right? So people nowadays, I think most are saying like a mile is a penny. It could be a penny. It should be worth more than a penny if you're using it, in my mind, correctly. But that's what most people are now saying, is because I earn, 1x, 2x, 3x miles or points on spending, same thing as cashback. It is if you cash it out. But if you're using that for a flight or a hotel stay, depending on who you're earning it from, because obviously the number of points that you earn vary from program to program, they're not the same. No two programs are the same, right? Each program has a different value, and it varies as well based on what you're redeeming it for. So the mile is not worth any set value, even from person to person, even the same program, right? It depends what you are redeeming it for. So everybody values points miles differently. Again, even the same programs. So that is something that I think is the biggest myth. The second myth, right, that's out there is that you should be stockpiling points and miles for, this amazing dream getaway that you don't have, that's concrete at some point in the future. I mean, if it's a honeymoon or, an anniversary trip or something that, you're going to go on in a year or 2 years time, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about like this hypothetical thing that you may or may not go on in like 3, 4, or
Racking
5
up
years.
hundreds and hundreds of thousands, if not millions of points or miles.
Exactly. Because if you do that, you're going to be disappointed, because miles and points, they go in one direction in terms of value, downwards, right? They do not appreciate in value. You stockpiling them is effectively wasting money, right? You should be spending your points and miles as you earn them. Obviously, you need enough to redeem, right? You're, as you said, 50,000, 60,000, 100,000 miles to go on whatever flights you're talking about here. But once you've crossed the millions threshold, then you are able to go on whatever trip you want.
Right.
So you should be spending them.
Yeah,
You should
first
not be
class,
stockpiling them.
Ritz, Carlton,
Yes.
wherever in the world you want to go, basically.
Exactly. So that's what a lot of people, and a lot are not doing that on purpose. A lot are doing it inadvertently because they don't know how to optimally redeem them. They know that these points and miles have value, right? They've learned that. They've been told that from everybody in the space, but they haven't figured out how to use them, right? And so because they know they're valuable and they know they want to use them at some point in the future, they're now by accident have now stockpiled 2 million miles or something, right? But guess what? Every year they go down in value. So you really should be spending them.
And so, what is the problem and the vision behind Odynn? Like, when did you have that aha moment where you're like, okay, I need to build a platform like this?
So the aha moment was when we were forced to shut down Curator, actually. So when we realized that this new dynamic pricing ruined our recommendation system for Curator, right? And we shut it down, we're like, well, what do we do now? and so we asked ourselves, okay, well, this is a brand new problem in space that nobody has dealt with or seen before. And I'm going to give you a brief history lesson here. Going back to 1980, when the concept of an airline mile was first invented by American Airlines, it was literally in 1980. From then up until 2021, for 40 plus years, airline miles were statically priced. They were fixed in value. Now, this wasn't like the same price going back to 1980. They updated the pricing every year or two. But again, they were fixed, right? And then in 2021, when they switched to dynamic pricing, they completely threw out this fixed pricing. So it was a seismic shift in the space that nobody had ever seen. And then compounded with the fact that nobody noticed that this happened. Why did nobody know that this happened? Well, nobody was traveling in 2021. It was COVID. right? Nobody was spending their points and miles, so nobody had any idea that this happened. And so we asked ourselves, okay, so what are the ramifications for this? Well, once this percolates and people start to understand, they're going to get really, really annoyed, right? Because their points miles were devalued. They don't know the cost of anything anymore. They're going to spend more time searching and planning these trips. Ultimately, what are they going to do? They're going to start canceling their credit cards with these high annual fees, right? Their retention is going to be an issue. We also realized that our B2C play with Card Curator, while we did it quite successfully, is not our area of expertise. We're not B2C guys. We're from finance, we're from consulting, we're dealers, right? We make sales.
Yeah,
So we're like,
market makers.
exactly. So B2B made a lot more sense to us. Okay, if not selling to the cardholders, who do we sell to? The card issuers. It makes perfect sense because they were going to be negatively impacted by this. Why? Well, when they made these partnerships with the airlines and hotels, they gave carte blanche to the airlines and hotels to run and regulate their own loyalty programs. It was theirs. So when the airlines and hotels changed to dynamic pricing, they weren't breaking any rules or laws or contracts. It was well within their rights. They did everything that they were allowed to do. Unfortunately, it meant that the banks and the cardholders were negatively affected by it. And so that's how the idea for Odynn came about, was to solve this loyalty issue that was created in COVID, right? To help increase cardholder retention for the card issuers. And so that was the turning point. We just happened to have the right team in the right place at the right time because RIP, we had shut down Card Curator.
And why is this an issue for the card issuers in particular, right? Because you have almost like three parties here. You have the issuers, you have the bank, and then you have the consumer, right? Anybody else in this transaction that I'm missing?
Well, the card issuers and the banks are partners, so their incentives all perfectly aligned. So it's the card issuers / banks, the consumer, and then you have the airline hotel loyalty programs. So those are the three players.
Yeah.
In it. And so ultimately, the airlines and hotels, right, they were struggling a lot during COVID. They were basically out of business. They were bankrupt, right? And so they obviously got bailouts from the government to help stay afloat. Then the other thing that they had to do to stay alive was they had to leverage the only asset they had, their loyalty programs, right? So what do? They sold billions and billions of dollars worth of points and miles to their banking partners, who are happy to buy points and miles for pennies on the dollar because they got a great deal. They're going to buy them anyways. But what happens when you flood a market with a whole bunch of currency? You get hyperinflation, right? Anyone that took macroeconomics 101. So that's effectively what this was, is hyperinflation. And the airlines and hotels could not, in good conscience, keep their pricing fixed because then they would just be losing a lot of money. So they had to decouple, right, their pegged currency, which was what miles were when they were fixed, and let it float, which is now where the environment that we're in. And so when they did that, right, the banks and their partners, their co-branded card issuers, right, this is where airlines and hotels make a lot of their money, right? They were not aware that this was going to happen, right? Or they were aware, but they weren't aware of the real ramifications of what was going to happen. And the banks also, let's face it, they were struggling too. People were traveling less, right? Nobody was signing up for new cards. Some people are even canceling their cards because they're like, hey, I'm struggling financially. I can't afford to pay $500 a year for this card. And this card is a travel card, and I don't need lounge access, and I don't need check bag because I'm not flying and I'm not traveling. And so what did the banks do? Well, they started increasing annual fees on these cards. That compounded the problem of cardholder retention, right? And so the area that we come in and that we help for the card issuers and the banks themselves is we solve this gap. We are able to pipe in the live loyalty pricing from all their program partners, right, into an aggregated space combined with their already existing travel portals that they have. Users don't need to guess at the value of the points and miles that they're earning. They can see it in real time, compared side by side with cash. So they can immediately say, oh, these points miles are saving me $3,000 on this round trip business ticket. Really good money. I'm getting great value out of this. I'm going to redeem my points and miles. So we're increasing redemption, which helps the cardholder because, again, as we said, we don't want to stockpile these points and miles. You want to spend them. So they're getting great value for them at that moment in time. And guess what happens? They got a free trip. They get a serotonin, dopamine rush. They feel great. They want to do it again. How do they do it again? They swipe on that card, right? They earn more points and miles. So they become a much more entrenched user, right? Which means that they're spending time on our banking partners' platforms through increased engagement and touch points, right? Because it's all in one platform. You don't need to go to delta.com anymore or marriott.com. It's all in one place, right? That means that one, our bank partners can cross-sell those cardholders and other products, right? That might be higher margin, as well as get them to use their cards more. So they're getting all that interchange as the card spend is increasing. And overall, we increase cardholder retention. So what does this lead to fundamentally? We increase customer lifetime value for the card issuers and the banks because we're pulling everything into one place and we're demonstrating the value of their cards better than they can themselves.
And, so the big insight here is like, one, the timing of it, right? Removing a pegged kind of currency model for these points and miles to kind of afloat created this enormous problem for all these issuers and banks, because now they all have to build the same infrastructure to communicate with their customers. And then that's sort of undifferentiated work. So why not hire someone like you guys, Odynn, to solve this complexity for them? So now you guys become this platform of record that now sits white labeled inside of their platform to help communicate the value of their points and miles.
Exactly. And it's exactly like the number one partner for the banks in the space that came before us, points.com, now known as Points. They facilitate the liquidity, the physical transfer of points and miles from a bank program to an airline or hotel. And there's a reason why they are an independent party, right? Because there's no need to reinvent the wheel here. They facilitate the transfers. So every major bank in the US and internationally uses points.com, Points now, to facilitate the liquidity, that transfer. We are in fact doing the same, but from a transparency, spending, redeeming side of things.
Interesting. Wow. Very, very complex, and this, for the audience, this is probably the third time it's been explained to me. And it's still like, okay, there's a lot going on here. And it takes somebody from Merrill who did derivatives trading to figure it out. What has been, the biggest challenge in scaling this with banks and travel partners?
I mean, every startup deals with this. It's the chicken and the egg problem. So if anyone here listening is, taking a business class or went to business school, the first thing that you learn in entrepreneurship class is you sell first, build second, right? You get your wait list, you get your user base, you get like informal commits.
I will buy this if you build it, kind of.
Exactly.
I will pay you $10,000 a year if you go build this. I want this now. When can I have it?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Like that's what you're supposed to do. We were not able to do that. Why? Because as you just said, this is the third time that we've talked about this and you're still learning about it. It's an incredibly complex problem. So explaining it to somebody in a way that they're willing to commit tens, hundreds, millions of dollars upfront for it is, or has been for us, impossible, right? We were not able to do that. So we had to raise the funds to build the product first to then go sell it. And it's easier to raise investment money to build it than it is to lock in customers on a non-existing product. So that's what we've had to go do. And that was the biggest hurdle for us. And we now have a live product, right? We are now in the implementation phase. And since we finished this, we launched the beta for the Holistic Travel Portal in June of 24. So, was that 7-8 months ago? That was the beta. The finished product only really came about towards the end of last year. Between the end of last year and now, we've signed 10 new contracts, 3 of which were in the last month, right? And so we're now stacked on implementation into August, just on rolling this out.
Just getting the existing people that said, yes, I need this, the existing businesses out there, which is when we like to invest at Team Ignite.
Yes, exactly. And in these contracts,
you absolutely, like you're hamstrung by the lack of funds to go implement all these contracts. And
exactly.
It's like, okay, clearly you have some product market fit here. There's a pull. Do you feel that kind of pull from the market right now where you're kind of like, yeah, now I have something people need and there's this crazy pull?
We do, because we don't have a sales team. I'm the only one that's doing sales. To be honest, a lot of my sales is me just reading my inbound email from, and to be fair, like I'll be the first to say, my website is atrocious, right? Our product website looks great. The product sells itself. But our Odynn.com website is not the best. We do have a basic inflow form for customers that are looking.
I think that's how everyone feels about their website. I don't think anybody's happy with their website.
That's fair.
Yeah.
I am also a bit of a perfectionist. So, but we realize that it's better to lock in sales than rebuild a website. So that's why it's just not high on the priority list. And the number one reason we get inbound, it goes along the lines of, I'm currently on Expedia or Booking or some subsidiary of Expedia or Booking like Priceline or Orbitz or whatever. I'm actively losing customers, cardholders, because the customer service from our travel portal is so bad that people are getting frustrated and they're canceling their credit cards. That is the number one thing.
I need to take over this customer experience, but I don't have the technology to run this, and I don't.
Exactly.
And it's going to take me a year to go build it, but I can buy it from you.
Exactly. And so they say, can you help? Can you help us? Please, we really need help. And the answer is yes, that is exactly what we do. More than happy to help, because our product, the way that we built it, is 100% modular. So we're able to configure it to all of our customers' needs, hyper specifically in a much shorter time frame. So if you go to any of these big players, right, and you say, hey, I want a custom specific job for us, they're going to say it's going to take you about a year. It's going to cost you anywhere from $500,000 to $1.5 million to build it, right? And even then, it's going to be roughly the same as any other
maintain
product.
it, and yeah, it's just undifferentiated work.
Exactly. And so for us, We say we can do it in anywhere from 1/10 to 1/20th of the cost. I can do it in as little as 2 weeks. The longest implementation has been 6 weeks for us for like a very, very custom heavy job with a special authentication flow. And it'll be up and running. And the beautiful thing about this is we can iterate with all the other competitors that are out there that are offering this, right? If you want to iterate, they're just going to charge you another few $100,000 to modify the platform. And again, it's not going to really change that much, right? So for our customers, they're like, hey, we want to A/B test this, or we want to see what the revenue is before we do X, Y, Z. That's what we are here for. We're able to evolve and constantly improve the program for our customers so that the revenue flow that they are earning from it, because we pay them, right, to use this, right? It's just only going to increase because we can make it better for each customer. And it becomes more and more unique as well, because each one of our customers, their customers, right, the card holders or whoever they're selling into, they're all unique. They all have different wants and needs, right? So we're able to personalize it for them.
Very cool. And so, how do you guys make money? Is it a percentage of the revenue that flows through? Is there a SaaS fee, or is it both?
It's a combination. It depends on what our customers are looking for. For the major players that already have existing travel portal that are not quite ready to leave from that travel portal, we can layer in our loyalty pricing APIs or our perks and benefits, travel DNA wallet APIs into their existing platform. That's standard SaaS fees. Right, there's no rev share or anything on that. For players that are looking to rip them in place, or say you're like a Series B, C, fintech credit card startup, either in the corporate card, the consumer card space, and you're like, hey, now established, we want to launch a travel portal to compete with the Amexes and Chases of the world. For them, it is a rev share on commissions. So we pay them anywhere from 50 to 75% of the net commissions that come through the travel portal, right? So this is profit generating for our customers. We take the remainder of the net, right? We get paid that. We take a little bit off the gross to cover the operational costs and overheads. And then we also have a platform fee that gets waived for every dollar commission I earn. That platform fee gets reduced by $1. So far, the way we have it set up is our customers have not paid us any money, right? Because their commissions have exceeded the platform fees always. Now, I can't guarantee that will always be the case, but so far, that has been the case. We've been able to set that up correctly. And this just guarantees us a minimum level of revenue to set up and implement and run. And then if our customers want a custom job, we do charge for that implementation. But unlike our competitors, we do not make a profit on that. We do it at cost. So for anything that is out of the box, that's totally free. Standard white label logos, branding, color schemes. Again, that's free. Standard authentication, that's free. Anything beyond that, we will charge at cost.
So how do you see this all unfolding over the next 5 years?
That's a great question. So you're obviously a very intelligent VC. That's not something that a lot of VCs would like to hear, but it's acquisition, right? So if you take a look at every successful loyalty fintech in the last 10 years, they've been acquired. Take a look at Chase alone in the last 5 years. They bought CX Loyalty for a little over $4 billion. I think that was in 22. They bought Frosh Loyalty, I think in 23 for about $5 billion, right? A whole host of other players for hundreds of millions to low billions.
What did these loyalty startups do?
CX Loyalty literally is offering what we offer now, just in more antiquated form. So CX Loyalty powers Chase travel, right? That travel portal, if you have a Chase credit card and you've logged in, they power that. So that's why Chase acquired them. Frosh Loyalty is that personalization, that concierge level service that you get if you were to call the Chase line. That's what Frosh does. They also help a little bit on the corporate travel side too. So they're kind of a blended offering, but again, very similar to what we offer on our end. So that's just Chase alone, right? Take a look at Capital One. They've plowed in hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars into Hopper, right, which powers their travel portal in terms of investments. And they've acquired a range of concierge travel loyalty booking services to special events and dining. They're expanding very rapidly. Capital One's been plowing a lot of money into that space. And then not to mention Amex, right? American Express, was the last week, I think they announced that they would be acquiring Circle for $600 million. Circle is corporate travel expense management tech piece, which we are also expanding to offer for our corporate travel clients. So each one of these components, it's crazy, right?
A lot of consolidation in the industry. Each of these card issuers and banks are trying to differentiate with the tech and the customer experience. And turns out they're not tech companies, right? And so they have to acquire the platforms and the user experiences externally. But imagine you don't get acquired, right? So 5 or 10 years down the line, what's the business look like?
If we don't get acquired, then we start turning into a modern day version of Expedia. So Expedia, for those that do not know, most people don't know this, makes roughly 70% of their revenue B2B. They're not a B2C company.
Wow. That's surprising.
Yeah,
I wouldn't
most
guess
people,
that.
You
Yeah.
think Expedia, you see Expedia.com, they're a consumer. No, they're B2B. Why? Because they power most of the travel portals for most of the major banks around the world. That's how they make their money. They are publicly traded. I mean, market's been going down, but I think they're around a 30 billion, 35 billion market cap, give or take. And yeah, it is by driving B.
But it sounds like there's a gap in the space in the stack, in the loyalty stack, where you could slot in an Expedia and Booking and all these other travel portals and all these banks and all these various portals could just decide like this is undifferentiated work here in this loyalty cash in your miles and points layer. I'd rather just use a platform to handle all that ambiguity.
Yes, there certainly is. And so I would not say that Expedia and Booking will be out of business in 5 to 10 years. Like, we're not going to drive them out of business. What they have and what they are unique is their scale and scope of suppliers, right? So I do not have access to 2 million properties around the world because I've connected to all 2 million properties. I can never do that. Booking.com and Expedia can, and they have.
They have the inventory on the supply side,
Exactly.
but you can't cash in your American Airlines miles on Expedia.
No, you cannot.
They have their own point system now too, right?
Yep, one key.
One key. And so even if you book on Expedia now and you go to like a Marriott property, you don't get Marriott points anywhere. You don't get Bombay points. You get Expedia points. Everybody's kind of, if anything, it's almost like a market is being fractured. You know, it's becoming more fractured over time, not less.
It is, and so that's ultimately that gap, right? That the fracturing, that's creating more and more opportunities for us, because the more fractured the market gets, the less transparency, the less liquidity there is, and so that makes it easier. There's more land for us to grab, right?
Like, could you see yourself like in the future maybe partnering with Expedia and saying, hey, wouldn't you like to be able to, you know, pull in other reward programs and things like that and let them cash it out? And maybe you're the market clearing mechanism for all these
Yeah.
other portals.
Yeah, we totally could, and we already not Expedia, but for access, because we have the full 2 million properties that exist on planet Earth, right? We get that from our travel supplier Duffel, right? And Duffel has direct relationships with major airlines and hotels, as well as Booking.com. So they actually are supplying us through Duffel onto our platform. So we do work with Booking.com, right? They do make a lot of money from us from the bookings that are flowing through, because they take their cut, right? Everyone needs to get paid. And so we're already working with them on that side from the supplier endpoint, but then they could also become, as you said, customers of us. Why? Because everybody would like to get a larger piece of this fractured market, right? And if they're able to redeem loyalty points that are usually only redeemable on a particular airline or hotel website, then that expands their pool of potential customers.
Yeah, and how does this work in the industry now, and ideally with your platform? Because you go to, I don't know, you have Alaska Airlines miles. That's my experience. I was from Seattle, and I flew there a lot for work before I was a VC, working at Microsoft and Amazon, and so I had a lot of Alaska Airline miles. But you could only cash those in on the Alaska Airlines website and with some of their partners, maybe if you're lucky. Like American Airlines, I think, was a partner, and then they weren't a partner, and then they were a partner again. I don't know. And so is the promise in the future is like, hey, if you're Alaska, you can create a better portal that has access to all the stuff that Duffel has, and allow those miles to be worth more to your customers, basically.
That's not happening in the next couple of years, but yes, down the road in the 5 to 10 year bucket, that is the idea. I'll give you an analogy going back to volatility trading. So before I was born in the 90s, when you wanted to trade a option, you had to call up a bank and say, hey, what's the price of this option, right? An option is a derivative product, right? What's the price of this derivative? And they would give you a quote. You call other banks and they would give you quotes. Then you would trade with the bank that gave you the best quote. They would take the other side of that derivative. They would have to, like, that's how it works. Now that bank would warehouse that risk, right? They would take the other side. Now, if you wanted to get out of that trade, say you wanted to unwind it, right? You would have to go back to that bank and pay basically whatever the price was that they gave you to unwind it. You had no other options, right? That was back then perfect opacity, right? There's zero transparency, right? And zero liquidity at the time. Nowadays, if somebody wanted to trade options, there are electronic screens where the market is maybe a couple cents wide, right? For pretty much any options contract that you want. So there's perfect transparency, perfect liquidity. That happened from 1980 to today, right? It took about 30 years, give or take, right? Maybe a little bit longer. But that's what happens over time, right? Is transparency and liquidity come into markets where there is money to be had. Now, in the points and miles in the loyalty space for travel, right?
It's almost more like FX, It's kind of like you're buying and selling different kind of currencies in a way.
Exactly. And if you were to add up all the points and miles, right, on planet Earth that are existing today in float, right, they would be the largest currency on planet Earth. They're larger than the US dollar, right?
Just in terms of their total value today.
Total value today, trillions of
Really?
dollars. Yeah.
Wow.
That's how many. Now, of course, there's tons of airline programs and hotel programs and shopping and retail programs and all this other stuff. But if you add all of them up, you're talking about trillions and trillions of dollars. Is the largest currency globally. And so ultimately, yeah, that is my goal, is to build a platform, an exchange, a marketplace, whatever you want to call it, right? Where there is much better transparency and much better liquidity, because ultimately everybody benefits from it, right? The suppliers, the airlines, the hotels, the middlemen, right? The banks or whoever is sitting in that middle, and then ultimately the customers, right? The consumers, the end people. So everybody has now benefited from electronic exchange.
This episode of the Ignite podcast is brought to you by our friends at Build, spelled BYLDD. Build is a development agency that specializes in helping early stage startups, especially non-technical founders and teams, build and launch scalable revenue-generating software products. Most startups don't have $100K to hand over to a big agency, and honestly, for your first product, you probably shouldn't. Sure, you could try rolling the dice on some freelancers, but that's a gamble with unclear costs and a lot of project management headaches and no guarantees. That's where Build comes in. For just $10K in about a month, Build can turn your validated idea into a real product that's ready to go to market. It's a smart, efficient way to build a foundation for a company of any size. And yes, companies that start with Build can and have scaled very large. Their clients have gone on to be backed by YC, Y Combinator, and Google, and raise funding at multi-million-dollar valuations. Ready to get started? Head over to build.com. Again, that's BYLDD, to connect to Ayush and the team and let him know you heard about Build on the Ignite podcast.
Work today. So I'm an issuer and someone has 100,000 points and they come to my portal. Odynn's powering it. And I go book a Marriott hotel or whatever it is through a partner of the issuer. What does that transaction look like? So there's a debit and a credit that takes place from an accounting perspective. I'm a finance accounting guy, so I'm trying to think about the debits and credits of the ledger. Like, how does it work, financially?
Let's say that we're live in Built, right? So Built does transfer to Marriott. So let's use that as an example. So in the Built travel portal, right, we are powering the hotels portions of Built. And so when you go into that, you're going to see your Built balance. Say, as you said, you have 100,000 Built points, right? Now, Built, if you transfer a large enough points balance to Marriott, you're going to get a 25% bonus. But for this argument's sake, let's just assume it's 1-to-1, right? One Built point equals one Marriott point for simplicity. So you find this Marriott hotel, I don't know, in London, right? And it's 50,000 Marriott points per night. You're going to stay there for 2 nights. So it's 100,000 points. You click on that and you're like, okay, you go through and we show you on the Built travel portal app, hey, here are all the hotels in London, right, that you can use your Built points on. Here's the cost in Built points and here's the cost in hotel points, because sometimes it's not 1-to-1, right? We show them what that translates to. They click through to confirm that it's there, right? We can also show the full calendar of other days if you wanted to look at other days and the pricing for all that. And then if they want to go book, there's a transfer button right there. You hit transfer, that takes you to the Built transfer page. And it preloads the number of points that hotel is going to cost and the number of Built points they're going to transfer. You have to hit transfer again to confirm, because you need the user opt-in. There's
sure, yeah.
Double opt-in. And the reason why we don't do this for people is because actually there's a lot of rules and regulations around this. If I was to do this for a person on their behalf, I would actually need power of attorney to do so. So we cannot, right, do that. But they opt in, they transfer, so that now hits your Marriott balance, right? You're now taken back to the page that you're on. And then within the Built app, the Marriott page will pop up for checkout, right? Because your accounts are linked, you're already logged in, and it'll confirm the dates, the time, the total cost, points, right? And then if there are extra taxes or fees, sometimes there are, sometimes there aren't, right? Then your card's already linked, you hit book, done. It's that seamless, right?
And then, so what is the transaction between those two entities? There's a debit and a credit. So there's some sort of cash transfer between the two entities?
It could be in real time. There are two methods for it.
Usually they settle like once a month or once a quarter or whatever.
Yeah. Exactly. And generally large entities also stockpile. So if you're a major bank, obviously I'm not sure how Built is set up with their unit economics, but if you're a Chase or an Amex, you'd actually be sitting on billions and billions of Marriott points already, right? You've already bought them. They're on your balance sheet. So you would never actually...
You're a market maker in this case. You're like a bank.
You're warehousing the inventory.
Yeah.
Right?
You're like the option. You're like the bank in the 80s. You're sitting on a bunch of these options.
Exactly.
These derivatives.
Exactly. And so you wouldn't be going to Marriott for every 100,000 points and then netting off.
No, you just debit and credit it on your own accounts and you're like, good, cool.
Exactly. And then when you
Wow.
need more, you go to them and you buy another tranche of like, $100 million worth of points or
Wow.
whatever it is usually how it works. Now, for smaller entities like a Built or others, they might have a more monthly accounting system where they're not buying them in $100 million tranches because that's a lot of points miles of warehouse on your balance sheet. Right. That cost of collateral, as you know, is very high these days. So I assume it's a little more flexible than that, but they're not going to be netting off every single transaction. As you said, it's probably going to be a more monthly thing. We're like, okay, we have transferred and bought the equivalent of 10 million Marriott points, right? 10 million Marriott points we've agreed to is a rate of, I'm making a number here, half a cent per point, right? So then therefore we owe you this.
So are you guys basically building almost like a Stripe for points then, in a way? It's kind of like you're enabling all these transactions and understanding and accounting of them. Do you actually enable when you go integrate with Built? Do you actually integrate that kind of points transfer and understanding all that, or do they have to tie that to their backend systems? And you guys are more like kind of the tracking of the point differential, the exchange rate.
So it does tie into Built's backend systems. We do not touch their ledger, right? We are simply providing the information for them to update their own ledger, right? But the actual transfer rails, that's done by Points, points.com, that company that I mentioned before. So they power Built. And so when the end user is physically exchanging Built points for Marriott points, that's being done on points.com's rails.
Okay,
Right?
you're
So
more
they're
like
the one.
you're Shopify in this equation.
Yes, we're the front end UI UX that is facilitating that natively. But the actual Rails is done on points.com. They also, to be clear, are not updating Built's ledger because they do not operate a ledger. And we've all seen what happens with fintechs, mismanaged ledgers. It's a disaster, right? So we have zero interest in touching that. But yeah, points.com plugs into us for that.
Fascinating. Wow, what a complex universe of things there. I'd love to switch gears and talk about your fundraising experience. What advice would you give to fintech founders raising capital this year?
Great question. I would say at the very start of this year, there was borderline euphoria in comparison to 2024, 2023. They were pretty rough years for fundraising. That's more later stage, but obviously later stage trickles down to early stage because if funds aren't able to IPO or get acquisitions, liquidity doesn't release for new capital for new investments. And things were quite euphoric until the last few weeks. A lot of uncertainty in the market these days due to tariffs and tariff talks, if you will. So I think that there's going to be some uncertainty in the market for the next few months. I think at some point it's going to settle back in because there is all this pent up demand for IPOs, for M&A activity, not just from like the VCs and the public markets, but there's a lot of interest in the private market side and private equity as well. Dams are going to be released at some point, right? So I still think that this year is going to be overwhelmingly positive for that. It's going to take a little bit of time for it to trickle down, but I think early stage founders are going to have an easier time than at the very least 2023 and the earlier part of 24. Like I think that
And
it's going to
VCs,
be
yeah, that's when we raised our fund. It was horrendous, 23, 24.
awful.
Yeah.
We raised rounds through that too, so I know exactly how brutal it is. But I genuinely do think that it will get better. And with the advent of AI in the fintech space, if you're doing truly unique things that have a proper moat and you can demonstrate the value add, then it's the space ripe for disruption, and there should be money for you.
The regulatory environment shifted for companies like yours. Is there anything shifting going on? Because these are currencies or derivatives, and I can imagine the SEC is going to start looking at it at some point.
Great question. Right now, it's not regulated by the SEC at all. It's regulated by the DOT, the Department of Transportation, because they regulate the airlines and the hotels. And there was the executive orders issued by Joe Biden just before he left office to rein in the manipulation of the currencies, the points miles, by the airlines and hotels to force them to be more public about how they're changing their loyalty programs and limit the amount of changes that they can make in a given period of time. Now, as to how enforceable that is or not, I'm pretty sure there are court cases going on about it already. It's hard to say. But as of right now, no, there is no regulation by the SEC or FINRA or any of those guys for these, even though they are, in fact, currencies. They're not treated as currency. So there is no real regulation. There is the constant talk of the Credit Card Rewards Act in Congress, which would be capping interchange, what credit card companies like Visa, MasterCard, Amex can charge for interchange for merchant purchases. That would then trickle down to how many points and miles a bank could pay out to customers. But that was already dead on arrival, even under the Biden administration with Congress. I can't imagine going through with the current administration, particularly because this is both sides of the aisle are against it, right? Both Democrats and Republicans are against this. It's how the U.S. has operated for a while, but never say never, because I mean, look at Europe, the EU, UK, Australia, like globally, their
We're going to put a
interchanges are
25% tariff on the foreign points coming into the country.
I mean, again, never say never. You don't know what's going to happen in this space.
We don't want those Canadian points here. No, I'm joking. That's terrible. A little political humor on the Ignite podcast today. What's been the toughest moment so far in building Odynn?
Beyond the raising the capital to actually build the product, right, to get it out there, and beyond shutting down Curator. I know that's not part of building Odynn, but like that also was kind of getting into it. So those were two very hard moments. So I put them on that list. I would say it was 6 months into starting Odynn. So we started Odynn in January of 22, and we started working on flights, loyalty pricing to begin with. But as you know, we talked about this, but our first product that we launched was hotel loyalty. So we had to pivot, actually. Immediately, as soon as we got into starting this company, 6 months in, we realized that the accuracy of our airline loyalty pricing was not good enough, or at least it wasn't good enough for me. We were at around 50, 60% in terms of accuracy, which, mind you, was infinitely better than anyone else because the accuracy was zero for everyone else. Like no product existed. But I was like, this isn't good enough, right? I wanted to be at least in the 80 to 90% range before we launched the product. And so we made the very hard decision to shelf airlines and switch over to hotels. And so we ended up launching the beta for hotels in like September, October of 22. So we got it out there pretty quickly because we were able to apply the learnings from the airline side to hotels. But yeah, making a pivot that early on, because we spent a lot of capital, a lot of time, a lot of energy trying to get that up and running. It was a very hard decision to make to stop work and start on another area versus constantly trying to refine it and improve it. In hindsight, I believe is the right decision, but at the time, it was not an easy one to make.
Yeah, it's tough. How do you approach hiring and building a strong company culture, especially kind of in this remote hybrid world?
So we at Odynn are fully remote, and so we don't have the overhead of office space, and I find it allows us to hire better talent because a lot of high quality talent does not like working in the office space, particularly if you're a high quality engineer. And so we are able to hire those individuals. And I also don't believe in the myth of, working from home leads to lower productivity. I find it's actually the exact opposite. I find that people are working more dedicated when they are able to.
It probably like leads to lower connectivity, if anything. Productivity high, connectivity lower. Like, how do you kind of handle that negative aspect of it? Keeping people connected.
That's definitely a great question. So we do every couple months, we do company on-sites where we get together in person to meet, talk through the big company plans. It's not a true traditional work day. It's more of like a grand brainstorming session where we all get like lunch and coffees together and what have you. So we do that every couple months, but we also use a platform called, and it's a remote office space. So each person that works at Odynn has their own virtual office with a virtual door, and people can walk around in the virtual office space and knock on your door and have a conversation. So you just pop into your office, and the offices are always video off, right? So you don't get that stress of being on video constantly.
It's double opt-in, basically. I knock on the door and you open the door. And now
yeah,
we're talking.
And I have to accept to let you in. And then if we're on other video calls or whatnot, if you're on a Google Meet or what have you, you'll see that the user is saying, do not disturb. They're in another meeting, right? Because their video camera is engaged. And so you can't even knock on their door, right? It's not even allowed. There's full messaging in there. So it replaces Slack. It replaces Zoom or Google Meets or whatever you use.
How is this better than like Teams or Slack? Because on Teams, I remember working at Microsoft, it would tell, oh yeah, John's in a meeting right now, or John's out of office right now, and okay, I shouldn't text him or try to call him on Teams. Like, how is Roam better than just using something like that?
Well, because it might sound simple, but seeing the office space, so like it's literally up on one of my screens, right? I see the virtual office, so I can see who's in the office, and like it even tells me if they're listening to music. I can see what music they're listening to. Like if they turn that on, that's personal preference. There's the full integrated chat system in there, like Teams, and you feel connected because you can see other people are working, right, when you're working, and you can communicate with them at any point in time. And it's not just a like chat function on Teams, right? You can talk to them like vocally by knocking on their office and just having a quick conversation. And then you can pull them into a meeting, right, if you wanted to, and then you're on video, and then you can share screen and all that in the meeting rooms. And so It basically mimics the idea of that water cooler talk when you're getting up to go get a glass of water in a physical office. And it cuts down on the need for scheduled meetings. It makes meeting times way more efficient. And then it's all integrated with a intelligent AI system. So all chats and all data and everything are all sitting in a unified AI inbox, if you will. So you can search for all products, documents, conversations, whatever. It's all there. So it makes it really, really easy. And then you can open up channels for your customers, right? So if you have outside customers, they can come in, they can come use it, they can come to your meetings. So we can host our meetings in there. It has an AI note taker for all that too. So it really does replace Slack and like
Zoom and
Teams and what have you.
Fireflies.
Yep.
All that stuff. That's interesting. I might have to try that once we grow our team. You've been featured in major media outlets like Bloomberg, CNN, Wired. How do you think about PR and brand positioning?
I think it's just an extension of good business. We are obviously B2B, but at the end of the day, a person is using our product, right? They're not using it directly, right? They're using it through our customers, and they might not even know they're using our product because a lot of times it's white labeled, right? So our name's not on it, not being advertised that we're the ones doing it. But there is a major pain point in the space that we're solving for. Transparency and liquidity and points and miles is an issue that anybody that has a Amex card, a Chase card, a Citi or Capital One credit card, which let's face it, is most of the people in America have one of these cards, right? It is a problem that they are all dealing with, right? And so by getting out there and saying like, hey, we are a company that is revolutionizing this space, we're making them aware that there are solutions to this problem, right? And they also can kind of help push us along. How do they do that? Well, they let their banks know that they're not happy with their current offerings, their solutions, right? And we can help provide that solution. So the more people that are pushing for us and getting the word out there that our solution exists out there, the more the major players are and our customers are willing to listen to us, to partner with us to solve this. And so it's not a short-term game. It's a very long-term. It's a marathon, right? It's not a sprint. And so we're doing this bit by bit, and more we're having companies that literally come to us, right, and saying, "Hey, I read about you in blah or this or that. Love what you're doing. Can we please learn more and partner?"
Right. If you could go back and give yourself advice at the start of your journey as a founder, what would it be?
I mean, besides don't do Card Curator, start Odynn earlier.
You probably wouldn't be doing Odynn without doing Card Curator.
No,
Right?
I
It
wouldn't
kind
be.
of laid the
And
groundwork.
if I said start with hotels versus air, I mean, maybe that one would have helped. I think I could have done that. But no, not playing the hindsight's 2020 game. I would say I'm not sure if it would be possible, but if it would be possible, I would say raise more money the first time instead of raising in tranches so that I could focus exclusively on building this without having to waste time trying to sell subcomponents to partners so that I can get a more
Whole
complete
product
product
solution. Yeah.
out of the gate.
Yeah.
But even then, like as you said, you learn stuff from talking to customers and engaging and getting that product out there. So you get that feedback too. So I'm not even sure if that would be the best advice.
Yeah. I was just talking to a founder this morning. He's like, yeah, I'm raising 2 on 10. I'm like, okay, why 2 on 10? And it didn't have a really good answer. I was like, why not 5 on 5, 500K on 5 mil? Why not,
Yeah.
1 on 10 or 1 on 7? Like what's the thinking behind this? And you have to be really intentional, I think. Like, what is the biggest risk of the business right now? And, what am I going to go solve over the next 12 months with this money? What am I going to go de-risk? Let's wrap up with a rapid fire. What's the most underrated travel hack people don't use enough?
Most underrated, they're not looking at partner rewards. So if you're earning American Airlines miles or Air Canada miles or whatever, most people just look at American Airlines flights. American Airlines is part of One World. One World is like 15 or 20 different airlines. Air Canada is part of Star Alliance, which is like 30 different airlines. So look at what the other pricing for other flights is. Might not necessarily be better, but there might be more availability, right? And you might be able to get that business class seat or premium economy or first class seat for not that many more points or miles. So I would say that that's the number one.
If you could partner with any financial institution or travel company tomorrow, who would it be?
I think the most innovative in the space right now is Capital One. So they would definitely be at the top of my list. Obviously, in terms of size, it's hard to beat Chase, and in terms of historical prestige, hard to beat Amex. But in terms of, I think, being the most fun to work with and what we learn the most from, it would be Capital One.
What's a fintech trend in 2025 that's overhyped?
Generic generative AI, I would say, definitely overhyped. So the advent of these agentic AI systems It's definitely going to flow through, and we're definitely going to see it changing the space significantly, but they are not going to replace people tomorrow or next week or next month, right? Will they replace them in 5 or 10 years? Sure. I'm not going to argue that, right? Like, definitively, but it's not going to change everything overnight. So you see these news articles, mostly out of the tech companies, right? You're not really seeing banks per se saying this, where they're like, hey, we're firing like 5,000 engineers or 10,000 engineers. Like, I'm pretty sure Facebook has been doing a lot of this. You're not yet seeing that come from banks. That's because they're slower to adopt technology, because they're more cautious, because they're more regulated, right? And I think that's actually going to be in their favor, because I have a sinking suspicion, and I think it's already starting to happen, that these companies are going back and rehiring some of the people that they've fired, right? Because not everybody's going to be able to be replaced with AI, but it will increase productivity, right? So you're going to see increased output on a per person basis with not that much more capital required, right? So I think that's the most overhyped. And so if you see any fintechs that are claiming that they're going to replace your entire X department, I would be quite skeptical about that. Are they able to reduce the need or eliminate the need for new hires? Sure, maybe, right? I think that's a reasonable assumption. But firing a 100-person, 1,000-person department and replacing it entirely with a AI agent, I would start to be skeptical of that.
Inverse of that, what's a fintech trend that's flying under the radar?
Definitely, I would say embedded loyalty. So our space, right, that we're in. So when we started working on Odynn in 2022, embedded fintech was not even coined as a term, right? So embedded fintech only started come about, I think, in 23, if I'm right on that one. And then I just read for the first time embedded loyalty sometime in like late 24. And it's like, oh, that's what we are. I didn't even like have a term for it. I was saying we're embedded fintech, but with loyalty focus, right? And so I only started reading about that a few months ago, really like 5-6 months ago. And so as we just established, loyalty is a massive, massive space. And it's directly tied into travel and retail, right? Both of whom are very antiquated sectors, right? And it's at the intersection of those sectors with finance, which is also antiquated. So there's a lot of room to grow and expand and improve, a lot of wood to chop, if you will, in this space. And so I think people should be looking out for embedded loyalty fintechs. I think that's definitely going to be quite exciting.
Yeah, I love that. What's a book or podcast you recommend to every founder?
Ooh, that's a great question. My favorite book that I think everybody should read, regardless of if you're a founder or not, is Thinking Fast and Slow. Felt like, so I was a psych major in undergrad, along with econ and math. I did a few, but I know if you're a psychologist listening to this, you're not going to appreciate what I'm about to say. I feel like that book basically summarized my entire major. Like, that's how great I thought the book was. And so if you haven't studied psych for many, many years, or if you're interested or you want to understand a little bit more about how people think and operate and what biases or non-biases they have, I think it's phenomenal. I think it's way better than the like catchy books of like what you learned at Harvard Business School or what you don't learn at Harvard Business School. Or, there's a million of these different things, or like how I made my first $1 billion starting XYZ companies. Like, I think those books really don't do much for people, but Thinking Fast and Slow, highly recommend it.
Yeah, I haven't read it for 10 years. I need to go back and reread that. If Odynn had a company motto, what would it be?
We do have one. It's earn more, go far. So that's our tagline. So you can make it what you will. The way that I interpret it is earn more points, miles, or earn more cash back, or earn more whatever you want. Go far, travel with it, use it, spend it, enjoy it, right? Yeah. Life is about activities. It's about things, experiences, right? It's not about material possessions in my mind. And so that's what people aspire to. It's what people get joy from, right? It's what people want. And so that's what we're helping people do. We're helping make people's lives a tiny bit better.
Love that. You're stranded at an airport with a 10-hour layover. What's the first thing you do?
Walk into the nearest lounge.
Which lounge?
Walk into the nearest lounge.
The nearest lounge, okay. Because you got one of your cards that has
exactly. I have 35 cards in my wallet. I have access to Centurion lounges, Sapphire lounges, Capital One lounges, Priority Pass lounges, Delta lounges, American. Like, I have access to most lounges on planet Earth. So I will walk into a lounge.
Who has the best lounge?
Ooh, that's a fun question. It depends what class of service you're flying and where you are. Generally, Priority Pass, which is the like generic thousands lounges that you get if you have a ultra premium card like an Amex Platinum or a Chase Sapphire Reserve. They're not the best in North America. They are phenomenal in Europe and Asia. So if you're in Europe or Asia, Priority Pass lounges are great. So anybody that has those cards or doing a lot of travel over there, you should get a Priority Pass, be one of those cards. Totally worth the money. Domestically, I would say, even though they have a much smaller footprint, the Chase Sapphire Reserve lounges are very, very nice, particularly the one in LaGuardia. I think it's great. The one in like Austin, if you've ever been there, they have like an outdoor patio, which is quite nice. Very few lounges have outdoor patios, but their footprint's small. So if you want a card that has phenomenal lounges with a large footprint, you can't beat the Centurion card. Amex Centurion lounges, like they've just been building them for longer, so they have a lot more. And then internationally, I'm probably gonna get a lot of hate from this from diehard loyalists, but One World lounges. So if you fly American, British Airways, Qatar, Qantas, Cathay Pacific, Japan Airlines, those guys, because they have different levels of lounges, right? They have business class lounges and first class lounges. Most of the other airlines, Star Alliance and SkyTeam, right? They just have one premium tier, which is like the Sky Miles Elite or Star Alliance Gold. That's a business class level lounge. So you can't enter first class lounges as a Star Alliance or SkyTeam as a higher tier because they don't have lounges that allow you for that access. Some airlines might, right? Like Lufthansa does have first class lounges, but you have to be flying Lufthansa first class, right? To get in. No Star Alliance level is going to get you into that lounge. Whereas with One World, right? Because I'm an American loyalist, I have Exec Plat, which is One World Emerald. I can walk into any first class lounge on One World just because I have that. And they're the only alliance that allows for that. So I highly recommend it. And they have some phenomenal lounges.
Well, amazing. Where can folks find you online to find out more about you and Odynn?
So we're at odynn.com, odynn.com. If they want to check out our product, that's awayz.com, awayz.com. Connect with me on LinkedIn, John Taylor Garner. I'm the only one on there, the top results. And we're also transitioning off of Twitter onto Blue Sky. So check us out on Waze, Blue Sky. And yeah, happy to connect. Feel free to reach out. We have partnership forums on our website. You can see my email on my LinkedIn.
Thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me. Happy to be here.